China's conceding to President Trump's demands. Climate change agenda in France is causing riots in the streets. Lastly, a Stanford frat is being told to remove the American flag because it is offensive. This is A Better World, and I'm your host, Luis Acevedo. Starting off today, we're going to talk about China and what they're doing to concede to President Trump's demands. Now, as we talked about yesterday, there has been a ceasefire between China and the United States for 90 days. That way they can work on some negotiation to make fair trade and also work on the theft of IP. This demand that was met today was regarding the theft of IP. This is an article from Bloomberg, and it states the following. China announced an array of punishments that could restrict companies' access to borrowing and state funding support over intellectual property theft, a key sticking point in its trade conflict with the U.S. News of the measure came just days after President Xi Jinping promised to resolve the U.S.'s reasonable concerns about IP practices in a statement after meeting President Trump at the Group of 20 summit on Saturday in Argentina. The White House said the sides agreed to hold off on tariff actions for at least 90 days as they negotiate to resolve specific U.S. complaints. China set out a total of 38 different punishments to be applied to IP violations starting this month. The document dated November 21st was released Tuesday by the National Development and Reform Commission and signed by various government bodies, including the Central Bank and Supreme Court. I think it's potentially significant if they are implementing and result in a reduction in IP theft, said Scott Kennedy, a China expert at the Center for Strategic and Information Studies in Washington. We've been down this road with China many times on IP. The attention companies pay to IP theft has risen dramatically, and despite the great attention it's getting, the violations have increased. Late last month, Beijing batted down a U.S. accusation that China is continuing a state-backed campaign of IP and technology theft, saying it was based on hearsay and ignores reality. The Trump administration began levying tariffs on China in July after the so-called Section 301 investigation by the U.S. Trade Representative Office alleged that China's IP and technology transfer policies are causing multiple billions of dollars in damage to U.S. companies. In an update released last month, USTR said China was continuing its unfair IP policies and accused Beijing of continuing a state-backed campaign of cyber attacks on American companies that were both intensifying and growing in sophistication. China says violators will be banned for issuing bonds or other financing tools and participating in government procurement. They would also be restricted from accessing government financial support, foreign trade, registering companies, auctioning land, or trading properties. In addition, violators will be recorded on a list and financial institutions will refer to that when lending or granting access to foreign exchange. Names will be posted on government website. This is a huge step forward, and this is a huge win if it is implemented and followed through by the Chinese government for America. This is what President Trump promised to do to combat the IP theft that is taking place over in China. Basically, if a foreign company wants to go over to China and do business and they're a technological company, they have to give up some of their intellectual property in order to do that. They have to give up some of their secrets in order to participate in the market over there, which is wrong. And a lot of other countries have complained about this as well. But no other country has stood up to China the way the U.S. has. Why has no other country stood up to China the way the U.S. has? Well, because we are stronger than China, and we have leverage over China, which is what President Trump used in the tariff wars. I know it hurt the farmers, it hurt some people in manufacturing and some other kind of companies as well, but this was a very smart move on President Trump's part to basically force the Chinese government to comply with his demands and assert American power. That way we can get back respect as a nation, which is something that we have lost, as we see with President Trump making these wins that Obama said was not possible. The economy is an example of that, where Obama stated that the economy would be growing at 1.8, and that's where it's at. Now the economy is far exceeding that. The employment rate is the lowest it's been in a long time for everybody, and if you go to subcategories like minorities, African Americans, for example, you then find that there's the lowest unemployment rate for them in years, if not ever. Likewise for the Hispanics. This just goes to show that we are a true powerhouse. The only issue is we had weak leaders for a long time. Now we have somebody in office who is actually willing to stand up for our country and make sure that we are getting what we deserve. And in return, we will help everybody else out as much as we can. But first, we have to make sure that we're getting ours, which is exactly what President Trump is doing. So this is a very, very good move right here. Like I stated from the very beginning, you can go back and watch my video or listen to the podcast. It's called something like Trade Wars, Winning the Trade Wars, something along the lines of that. And you can see that I called this a while ago, back when the trade wars were starting, essentially, that this is going to be President Trump's tool to leverage China into listening and complying with our demands. And that's exactly what's taking place right here. So another good move by President Trump, but of course the mainstream media is not going to give him any credit for it. So it is what it is. Now, something else that's going on right now with President Trump that can be kind of damning, not necessarily to his presidency, but more so to his reputation as the president. It's not going to take him out of office or anything like that, but it's involving Russia and the collusion allegations that have been pressed against him for a couple years now, and we still have no evidence. Well, yesterday, President Trump tweeted out the following: "I will never testify against Trump. This statement was recently made by Roger Stone, essentially stating he will not be forced by a rogue and out-of-control prosecutor to make lies and stories about President Trump. Nice to know that some people still have guts." This tweet right here was taken by the left and construed to apparently be witness tampering. They are stating that this is President Trump's attempt to influence Roger Stone not to testify in a potential pardon deal if he stands his ground and supports the president. The only issue is Roger Stone isn't a witness. There's no actual legal ground for their claims. I will concede to the fact that it is very stupid for President Trump to be tweeting out anything to do with the Russia investigation at the moment, because right now we have no evidence. The only thing that keeps getting drug up is old news, stuff that we knew a year or two ago. No breaking news stating, oh my gosh, we have an actual connection between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. There is still none of that. We just keep digging up old stuff because they're trying to find something in the last minute. It's the fourth quarter right now for the Russia investigation, and they're just scrambling around trying to find something to put together and try to throw the biggest mud ball they can gather at President Trump. Because that's all it's going to be. It's just going to get him dirty. But the good thing about President Trump is that he is a dirty dude. The dude gets down in the dirt all the time. So just throwing more mud on a muddy dude isn't going to do anything, really. He's just going to take it and keep going. That's why I said that it's going to ruin his reputation as a president a little bit. But as far as damaging his presidency, it's not going to do that. He's doing phenomenal work, as we just talked about, with China and the economy. And there's so many other things that he's doing that is very, very good. So we'll see exactly what comes out of the Russia investigation. Once the final report is released by the Mueller team, it seems that it should have already been out by now, but, like I stated, they're trying to gather up as much mud as they can so that way they can get that big mud ball and just throw it at them, because that's all it's going to do. So that's what's going on here stateside with the president, and, as far as our communications and relations with China, things seem to be improving on that front, and hopefully we will have the final report from the Mueller team soon. Now, in other news, going on across the pond is a climate change agenda that the French government tried to enforce, which their residents truly hated. If you haven't seen any of the videos yet or know anything of what I'm talking about, obviously I'm going to talk about it and tell you about it, but you should watch the videos. You can go on YouTube. You're seeing people tipping over cars, setting cars on fire, just riots in the street. The police are shooting rubber bullets at citizens. It's hell over in France right now. And the reason it's hell is because of the climate change agenda. So, this is an article from Time, and it states the following. The French government suspended fuel tax and utility hikes Tuesday, a major U-turn in an effort to appease a protest movement that sparked large-scale rioting in Paris last week. Basically, this fuel tax and utilities hikes were a way for them to try to wean themselves off of fossil fuels and put an incentive into renewable energy. That did not work out. The French people were extremely upset by this, and they just started taking to the streets, destroying it. Not saying that's the right way to go about handling this, but it was effective because now they're holding off for another 6 months before implementing these taxes. I also want to add, this is exactly why President Macron of France was dogging President Trump. As I stated before, he is doing this because his popularity ratings have gone way down. He is doing a horrible job as the president of France. He just caused a riot in the streets, a big one, by hundreds of people, if not thousands, that caused the police to shoot their own citizens with rubber bullets. That's what he did. And now they're calling for him to resign. Although they said, you know what? We're going to take away that tax. We're going to take it away. So no big deal. They're still like, no. That's not good enough. We want that guy who is going to implement it to resign because he is not for the people. You know what that is, President Macron? That's nationalism at its finest. Because the climate change agenda is part of the globalist agenda. We don't have a sound way to switch over to renewable energy yet. Germany's been trying to do it for a while. For almost 10 years now, they've been trying to do it. They're still having trouble mitigating the effects of a surplus in energy. And they're still needing to use fossil fuels when there is a shortage. And another question that I don't really understand, and maybe one of my listeners or viewers can tell me something that I don't know here. What do you do if your infrastructure fails when it comes to renewable energy? What if it gets destroyed some type of way? What if the units that take in the power from the wind or the sun are destroyed? How do you collect energy then? What if a natural disaster happens that wipes them out? What do you do? That's essentially why we have coal. That's essentially why we still have fossil fuels, because of that very reason. So what's going on in France right now, is no surprise. And like I was stating with Germany, they are losing money when they have a surplus, because now they have a negative. Now they have to charge a negative dollar amount because there's too much of it and not enough demand. This also took place in Texas and California as well, where you have wind farms in Texas and California. When there's surpluses, they're losing money because we don't have an effective way to transfer that energy. I'm not saying that I'm against renewable energy. I'm all for it. If we can have a cleaner way to energize our country and energize our world, I'm all for it. Believe me, I've made episodes about this in the past, talking about some European countries and also Australia, about what they're doing with plastic to make roads out of it, about how countries in Europe are effectively becoming self-sufficient when it comes to their own energy because they're able to control it. And they have a power distribution system within the community that can effectively distribute the excess amount of power or store the power for later usage coming from the sun or the wind, whatever. the way they're consuming energy. They have an effective way to distribute it. We don't have that on large scale right now. However, we do have nuclear power, which is a form of renewable energy, and we don't want to use that. We're trying to just use sun and wind. We really need to realize that this climate change agenda is important, but it's not as big a deal as people are making it out to be. We're talking about something that is, in the worst case scenario, the world's going to end in 100 years. Well, worst case scenario, we can get hit by a meteor in 10 years, 20 years. We can get attacked by another country tomorrow. So I am all for thinking in the long run. I'm all for renewable energy. We just have to realize that this is the wrong way to go about it. It is. It's not palatable to the people. The only ones who truly enjoy it are the elitists, are people who are too idealistic and don't see any negatives in the world, don't see any downside to their idea. They only see the positive, which I admire that. I do. I'm not trying to criticize that. I consider myself an optimistic person as well. The issue with being idealistic is that you forget that we live in a world where there's reason to be optimistic and reason to be pessimistic. And to me, right in the middle is the sweet spot, because then you can anticipate things from both sides. Fortunately, the elite don't care about that, and most college kids, younger people who are idealistic, don't understand the negatives that can come out of it as well. So that's what's going on in France right now. I'll make sure to stay up to date on that. It's very fascinating what's going on. I'm very intrigued by the attempts we have made thus far on renewable energy and our attempts to reduce carbon emissions as well. I'm very intrigued by it. So I've been reading studies on it now, trying to get a better understanding, because I want to be able to maybe communicate some ideas that I may have after learning about the system a little bit more. But right now what I see is that we don't really have something that can work. And I am not the expert when it comes to this. It's just the studies and the facts and the stories show that we're just not equipped to do this full transition that people want to do. All right, so the last thing we're going to be covering for today is an article from the Washington Examiner, and it's titled the following: "Follow these students' example. If someone complains about your American flag, get a bigger one." So apparently at Stanford University, there was a fraternity last year that was told to take the American flag down for fear of offending people. So you know what they did when they were told that they may offend somebody for the American flag? They said, okay, and got a bigger one. That's the right answer. Like the title of this said, that's the correct answer. They got a bigger one. They said, oh, this is going to offend somebody? Cool. We'll get a bigger one to make sure it offends whoever it offends, because we're in America. So if it offends you to be in America, maybe you shouldn't be here. And if it offends you to see the American flag, why the hell are you in our country? Seriously. So this is just another attempt by the left, which Stanford University is an extremely left-wing campus. And this attempt by the left is to rewrite history, as we talked about, demonize our country. Why do they want to demonize our country? Well, now the Democrats are very open about having an open borders policy. So they want to demonize America, therefore take away the patriotism, nationalism, whatever you want to call it, from the citizens, from the youth in particular, and make it so that way they feel they're a citizen of the earth and not a citizen to the nation, because nation states are made up, but this earth is not. This earth is real, and we're all people. We're all one. Now, that sounds very beautiful. The issue with that is how do you unify a group of people with no nation? That's essentially how we as humans evolved into being able to communicate on a large scale. we developed a mutual belief in something that everybody shared in order to remain a community, and we shared some sort of values. In America, we have a set of values. Unfortunately, those values aren't shared in other places. I think that we tend to have the greatest values in the world. That's my opinion, of course. But I think it's evident as well that we do. We're the most inclusive. We're the most free. We're the most progressive. And we also make sure that these citizens have power. Now, something that I read that goes along with this that's very discouraging is a new study came out stating that roughly half of millennials don't think America is a great country, which is completely asinine to me, is insane, because how could they say that? They claim that America's racist, we're bigoted, we're misogynist, we're patriarchal. Well, the issue is, how is America racist by and large when nearly a quarter of our population are first-generation immigrants? How is America racist by and large when overwhelmingly we elected the only person of color to run a first world country 2 times? 2 times. We're the only nation that has a extreme diverse group in our legislative branch, in both, that is, the Senate and, not both, sorry, sounding like AOC right now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, so I'm sounding like 2 legislative branches. No, in the Congress, we have a very diverse group of people. Obviously, it's heavy towards white men, but there is no laws stopping anybody from running to earn that position. As far as patriarchal, well, that's also stupid. We have women in power like crazy. If you want to look at a real patriarchy, why don't we look to the Middle East? We always leave out the Middle East. When we talk about racist, homophobe, xenophobe, patriarch, we always leave out the Middle East. They're the ones who fit that category more so than any other country right now. China's probably close to them. Russia's probably close to them. There's a lot of other countries that are close as well. But it's very sad because revisionist history is destroying America. It's destroying it. And not for the better, for the worse. They're trying to actually get rid of America. That's what they're trying to do. They won't tell you that right now because you can't do it instantaneously. It takes work. It's incremental steps to lead up to that. However, thank God that we have President Trump in office because he has reinforced American values by tenfold. He has. There's no debating that. And if you're debating it, you're delusional and you're brainwashed by the mainstream media. It's plain and simple. You're not living in reality. Or you're just completely ignorant to the truth, which will then be brainwashed by the mainstream media or your liberal college education. Mind you, I know I talk about colleges and schools a lot. I go to a college. I go to Cuyahoga Community College. I want to go to law school. So I have a lot of schooling to do. And I see a lot of this revisionist history take place in the schools. That's actually what I'm majoring in history. So I see this firsthand a lot. So that's the news for today. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all also had a wonderful Tuesday, or whatever day that you're listening to this on. I hope you had a wonderful day. And we'll see you again tomorrow. Peace.